Welcome back to Calgary City Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. On the roll, Councillor Jamieson. Okay, Councillor Johnston.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present for both myself and Councillor Jameson.
And Councillor Kelly. Councillor McLean.
I'm here.
Councillor Pantazopoulos. Councillor Schmidt. Councillor Tyers. Councillor Ward.
Here.
Councillor Wyness. Here. Noted remote, Councillor Ewell.
Here.
Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Chabot.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Dollywall.
Here. Here.
Thank you. Mayor Farkas.
I am here.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we are going to assemble a panel from 70 onwards from names that we had called previously, and then after this panel is concluded, we're going to go to 103 and onwards. All right, do we have on 71 Blair Cosgrove with us in the chamber online? Mark McWilliam. On 72, Vernon Yu, Connor McGibney, Patrick King, Christopher Villacorta. All right, please come on down. Please stand by. On 73, Patrick Mahaffey. On 74, Charles Toth, Bistrin Opachik, or Brett Turner.
Brett Turner is here.
All right, we are going to assemble a panel from 70 Thank you. Please stand by, Brett. Everyone, please make sure to mute if you're not the person speaking. On 75, Ray McPhee, June Heisler, Harkam Al-Kalan, or David Vera. Thank you. Come on down, David. On 76, Mihail Sarbu, Ray Vizina. On 77, Mary Manilato, Karen Lorto, or Kelly Zarnke. On 78, Faiza Fuzi, George Clark, or Jody Petrovich.
Jody is here.
Thank you, Jody. Please stand by. On 79, Madison Cox, Delaney Lamont Green, Jaideep Binder, Daryl McCrae, sorry. On 80, Dean Steinman, Thomas Eric Coyle, Tristan Chang, Mahad Rizain, or Sean Ovens. Is that you, Sean? Okay, come on down. And then on 81, Kendra Wanamaker, Steve Bentley, or Betty Burke. So is that you, Kendra? Okay, come on down. All right, so that'll be our panel. Oops, and that's 6. So we have one person in the chamber. I didn't catch their name, then Brett, then David, Jody, Sean, and Kendra. Maybe for the person I didn't catch their name, you can please approach. And if you just don't mind introducing yourself. Yeah, just on the far left, yeah. Thank you so much. If you don't mind just introducing yourself with your name and panel number.
Absolutely. Christopher Villacorta Lopez from Ward 10, panel 72.
Thank you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I actually want to start by apologizing for my earlier interruption. So thank you, and thank you all the councillors and the mayor for taking this large task and meeting people.
What I will say is, it was said previously, it's a very challenging environment to be in, and we're trying as hard as we can to adhere to the procedure, but you know, we fully recognize that it can be kind of an intimidating setting. So thank you so much as well to you and everybody else who's been bearing with us.
Thank you. I also want to thank the staff. You guys are absolutely amazing. One, not just because you helped me, but you guys are the fastest slideshow slingers in the West, so great job. I am grateful for this opportunity and a chance to contribute to a better city, to a better Calgary, and share with everyone my perspective and experience. As a born and raised Calgarian, growing up in Calgary, I have formed many wonderful memories. A good childhood where I was connected to the city and everything was close and accessible. Here in this council, we are all surrounded by people from different walks of life. Some Calgarian lifers, like myself, some migrated here, but all of us have good memories here. One particular memory I want to share to highlight the opportunity that this city gives its citizens is I grew up under the poverty line for most of my childhood with a single mother and my grandmother. And despite that, my quality of life, thanks to the city, was pretty good, I would say. I had an opportunity once, thanks to my school in the city, to attend a orchestra just right over there at the Theatre Calgary. And we got there by train. My cousin and I met our classmates, attended this orchestra for the first time, and then we were able to just hop back onto the city transit, back home, and we were able to experience some Calgary culture that day. And there was enough time for some teenage shenanigans along the way, too. So I am very grateful for living here in Calgary. And I know everyone here has great memories. And I want to take this opportunity to reflect and go into a little bit of nostalgia. So for 10 seconds, I promise, think about a memory of being here in Calgary. As I look around, I do see some genuine smiles. So you must have fantastic memories. And I think we can all agree that Calgary is a great place. And what I want to express today is that Calgary is big enough to share these Calgary moments, these experiences with other people. And that there is a great cost of hoarding these memories and being trapped by nostalgia. And this cost is just too high. I have seen the city grow, and I have seen farms lost as a result. I had difficulties accessing Calgary's parks as my family moved further outwards. Our endless expansion comes at the cost of our water infrastructure, something we are all too painfully aware of. It comes at the cost of our transportation, emergency response, and various natural ecosystems like wetlands. It stretches our tax dollars and how far it goes. And it will also impact the memories our children will form here in Calgary. Expansion isolates, alienates our youth, and Calgary has so much to offer them. Building outwards is like stretching a rubber band, and one day it will snap. What I ask today, knowing full well that many people ran on repealing the blanket zoning policy, is to reconsider. Because, or at the very least, replace the policy before we get rid of it. We were all taught very young about sharing with others. We have a lot to share, opportunities, memories, and a great quality of life with dignity. If we believe, as I do, that Calgary is a wonderful place to live, then let's share it. More people are coming. People we invited from outside the city, outside the province, outside the country. And more people will be born here in Calgary as well. So instead of stretching our resources, let's share this great city responsibly, sustainably. Do not repeal. Please reconsider, or at the very least, replace. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We'll go now to Brett on 74, then David on 75 after that.
Hello, Council. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Fantastic. I want to first begin by expressing how encouraged I am with you guys. I've been following along here for several days now, and I'm really impressed with the questions being asked and the engagement you've had with panelists thus far. I think you guys are doing a great job. I have 20 years of experience in the Calgary real estate sector. I own and operate a large real estate sales firm and also a residential property management company. Combined, we do about 1,500 housing transactions per year between rental and resale. I'm also a developer. I've recently completed 2 10-unit rental projects in Calgary, one in Spruce Cliff and the other in Shaganapie. I've got 30 more units on the way, 10 in Haysboro and 20 in Acadia. I'll also add that none of my projects are on an RCG zone parcel. More on this a little later. I spoke in support of blanket rezoning at the last public hearing because we badly needed more supply. But now, several years later, I can see that it was a bit of an overreach, and I would now consider myself a centrist on this topic. Combined with action by the federal government, blanket rezoning has made a real difference with respect to rental affordability. I can tell you that rental rates on all unit types are down by several $100s per month from peak levels. But when you drive or walk through the communities and experience the new build forms in action, it's just not quite right. So we need to work to find harmony. Blanket rezoning has sparked a needed debate on density, and it has gotten many community associations to finally come around to allowing density in their neighborhoods. You've heard it time and time again from the CAs. They say they're not opposed to density, but want it done the right way. But when this council has pressed them for practical solutions, they just aren't often sure what to say in response. I believe that the answer lies not in repealing the bylaw, but rather amending it ever so slightly. We don't need any massive change, just the guts to make small moves that, when market factors and development economics are taken into consideration, will make all the difference. Repealing it entirely would send us back to square one. The last 3 years and 2 historic public hearings would have been for nothing, and the debate will rage on. You guys can be heroes by amending the bylaw in a smart way rather than repealing it. And I have 2 practical solutions to propose to council today. The simplest and most elegant solution is to keep RCG as the base zoning. However, amend the bylaw to make basement suite development a discretionary use on projects of 5 dwelling units or more. This simple change will be the magic bullet that we're looking for. The reason we've seen such a prolific uptake of rental developments is not because of blanket rezoning, but also because of changes made at the federal level in the name of affordability. How construction is financed has not been discussed much at all throughout this hearing, but understanding it is a key to understanding why this has become so contentious and became a ballot box issue at the last election. CMHC insured financing allows developers to build rental projects with only 5% down, and the insured financing allows low interest rates, which makes new construction rental developments economic. By making basement suites discretionary would add just the right amount of risk to the development community to weed out the fly-by-night developers who seek only to build rental product with little equity and then resell the whole project later to an end user. Discretionary use would also introduce an opportunity for community engagement for residents to have a say in 8 or 10-plex projects being built on RCG, and for the city to take into account the concerns being raised for parking, laneway access, and the amount of other rental units nearby before granting a permit. This increased risk will see many developers move on to other build forms. I'm also here to tell you that 4-unit rental projects are not economic for development. So the development community would now pivot towards row townhouses being brought to the market for retail sale to owner-occupiers. This is an entirely different class of real estate and one we need more of. Having the guts to keep RCG would also enable side-by-side infill development, which is more likely to occur when there aren't a lot of rental 8-plexes nearby. 4-unit townhouses and side-by-side infill developments are homeowner demographics and entirely different from what we've seen in the last 2 years. I think the established communities could live at this density, as one new townhouse would be very close in price to the old homes they're replacing, and there'd be 4 less units contributing to parking congestion. This simple amendment, going from permitted use to discretionary on projects of 5 dwelling units or more on RCG, ticks all of those boxes. Now, if that won't fly, then I would ask council not to roll RCG all the way back to RC1 and instead roll it back to RC2. Almost every former R1 community can handle side-by-side infill development. People are upset because their communities went from having a single-family home to having to deal with an 8-unit rental development. That's a shocking change and probably went too far. But if we build out more infill-style homes that are widely accepted in some of the best communities in Calgary, we can accommodate more density and make meaningful progress on housing. My second recommendation is to instruct planning and development to get more aggressive with the allocation of HGO land use. This is what I look for as a developer, because HGO was designed, it was assigned to areas that make sense for rentals, close to transit, shopping, and you can go up a little higher to build bigger units.
Thank you
But the
so much,
LAPs
Brett. Brett, you're just at time, but please don't go anywhere. There may be a follow-up for you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. We'll go now to David on 75. Then after that, Jody on 78. Please go ahead, David.
Thank you. Mayor and councillors, thank you for giving me a voice here tonight. My name is David Vera. I live in Killarney, Ward 8. And I am an architect in the city. I studied architecture in Halifax and moved to Calgary in 2003. I wanted to take a slight angle to this discussion and just talk about a couple of projects that I've worked on that I feel are working. So my first project, I call it 4 Villas. A client was really interested in a kind of Scandinavian style design. And this one's located in Montgomery at 5228 21st Avenue Northwest. And the appeal period just ended last Thursday, and according to the SDAB, there's no appeals on this project, which I consider a win. I think what's interesting about it, or what the client has asked me to do, was only provide 2 secondary suites instead of 4. So essentially, tonight we're talking about unit counts on the site. There would be 6 units on this parcel. And we provided, you can go to the next slide, actually. You can go, and we provided 4 parking stalls at the back in a garage. So for this project in particular, I would have to say that the process was actually quite smooth with the neighbors and, of course, with my client, really, really nice to work with. There, I did a renovation to their house, and they own this rental property. And they wanted to redevelop it. So working really closely with them and on something that, they care about and is beautiful. There were some discussions over you can go to the next slide. There were some discussions about what makes a property, what people complain about at properties. And I have to say, just living on 33rd in Killarney, there's quite a few fourplexes that are going up. HGO just on the corner of 26. I have to say they're not very beautiful buildings. And I'm not trying to be like a snotty architect or anything. I just feel like when you do something that's designed and thoughtful and contextual, people don't think about it. They don't complain about it, and they don't appeal them. So even though this is a 6-unit, there's no appeals to the project. And maybe Montgomery's forward thinking. It probably also helped that there is a new secondary suite that's was under construction. It's probably near complete now. That's about the same size. So in terms of mass, these if we can design these units in a way that's kind of fitting to the neighborhood, people just don't complain. The hardest thing I had to deal with during the process was actually dealing with the development process. And not particularly with the planner, but mostly different bylaw questions and dealing with mobility in terms of how big the bike lockers should be. Why can't I use a product for a bike locker? A lot of issues dealing with the slope. It's a fairly steep slope site. So, you slope up to the back, and then you have to keep going up some stairs to get to your garages at the back. And you'll see that there's a slope across the entire front area, but we had to just slope 2% to the property line. So then we were forced to do these retaining walls, but they wouldn't allow us to do a concrete retaining wall. So they were trying to tell us to turn our stairs. So we negotiated kind of back and forth, and then we were able to put like some stonework to kind of like feather that down. So for me, that was actually the most kind of stressful portion, is dealing with the planning department in that sense. You can go to the next slide. This is just a view. You can see the semi-detached on the neighbor, and then our building just sticks out just a little bit further past it. So when it comes to the massing of these buildings, they could be similar to what semi-detaches are already at in a certain sense. They're actually getting bigger and bigger. I think people just want more area. I always try to convince clients, like, just go small and design it nicely. Go to the next slide. Actually, you can go to the slide after that. My next project I want to talk about is on 19th Street in West Hillhurst and 6th Avenue, where it turns into 5th Avenue, right across the street from the Community Association building.
Thank you so much. You're just at time, but if you don't mind, just a final sentence to conclude.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'll continue if people ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to David now, then Jody after that. Oh, whoops. Oh, my gosh. I apologize sincerely. Jody, it's your turn, and then Sean after that.
Good evening. My name is Jody Petrovich. I'm on panel 78. I am in favor of a full repeal to blanket rezoning without amendments. I am a proud millennial and would never consider one of these stack row houses. My generation grew up with grass, gardens, and the ability to have two people in an entranceway. We want single detached homes with ability to have our parents and friends for dinner, but with stack houses, parking close enough for them to safely walk is beyond challenging. It's been 2 years, folks, and I still haven't found that half car you outlined in 2024. It's simple. One stall per unit needs to be the minimum in residential areas. Full stop. This bylaw has successfully divided our communities. Your lack of engagement across all stakeholders reflects this. Listen to what has been presented. To be perfectly honest, why would I invest in a residential home with zero assurance that you won't change the rules when I'm in the thick of a mortgage? The uncertainty of what will be built on green space or beside you in Calgary is too high. What you are doing to longtime property holders and seniors is deplorable and what could be seen as expropriation without compensation. You ignore that my generation grew up in these communities and seem to only seek the narrative that is aligned with your goals. Some of us, believe it or not, like to cut grass. Level up to the destruction of trees and the canopy. Ironic, there was a story last week on the city giving 10,000 trees away when we're sacrificing these magnificent 50-plus-year-old established healthy ones. If a property owner touches a broken branch on a city boulevard tree, you come at them with significant penalties, yet you're witness to the destruction of these grand dames with legacy owners, and the cost falls to property owners due to redevelopment damage that you approved. I appreciate the need for density, but not your approach. In 50 years, when you are all long gone and we are left with this mess, who fosters the tax burden then? We will. Be responsible and look beyond this development for your profit model. Look deep within yourselves. Is this truly what you seek for kids and grandchildren? I am part of the future talent pool that Alberta seeks. Why should I stay when you refuse to listen to us? Responsible density is possible, you know it. I urge you to be better. Repeal without amendment.
Thank you so much. We'll go now to Sean and then Kendra after that.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for your time. My name's Sean. I'm on panel 80. I am a homeowner in Ward 7, and I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed repeal of citywide RCG zoning. So I first moved to Calgary when I was 4 years old. Growing up, my family lived in a range of housing types, starting with a fourplex in Bowness, then a duplex, a townhome in Ranchlands, and later a single-family home in Tuscany. As an adult, I left for school, but eventually came back with my wife to buy a townhome in Mount Pleasant. Through all of it, I really appreciated having all of those options as our family moved through different stages of life and different financial circumstances. I don't think there's anything fundamentally incompatible about those different housing forms, and I would love to live in a city where they could exist side by side rather than sorted into their own separate corners. What concerns me probably the most about repealing universal upzoning is that it takes us back to a system where those options are arbitrarily limited. So once again, the vast majority of the city will be effectively reserved for one specific kind of housing, and everything else has to fight its way through a slow, expensive, and uncertain approval process. One where the only people with the time and incentive to show up typically are the nearby neighbors who generally are strongly opposed. Meanwhile, people who do support more housing in the city generally can't be expected to show up to these dozens of individual hearings, as that just isn't feasible for everybody. I acknowledge the validity of concerns about universal upzoning. Things like tree canopy, privacy, parking, neighborhood character, these things do matter. But these are design and development issues, and I don't believe that the blunt instrument of zoning law is the right tool to address them. I want Calgary to be a city that allows flexibility, inclusion, and opportunity through its housing policy, and as such, I oppose the repeal of citywide upzoning. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Kendra on 81 to wrap us up.
Hello, Council. No doubt you've been waiting for me, for I'm the boogeyman that so many speakers have warned about. I'm the one who dwells in the townhome on the corner, who can ruin community culture simply by existing within it, who can drive up housing prices while lowering housing prices. Last time I was here, I tried to calmly yell math at you to explain why rezoning was important for affordability in our city now and in the future. Experts from city planners, environmental conservationists, homelessness, transit, and free market capitalists agree. This is a necessary but not sufficient tool on this path. I'm not an expert in these things. I'm a researcher by trade. So when I felt this growing problem in my life and I saw it in those around me, I looked at what the experts were saying. To save you from poorly regurgitated stats and facts that hopefully you already know, I thought I would share why this is so important to me. I grew up in Montgomery. It felt like a community in decline at the time. Schools were at risk of closing, homes were boarded up. I volunteered a lot as a kid, hundreds of hours. Community cleanups, planting trees, delivering newsletters, concession, casinos, you name it. Sure, I was a dumb pair of helping hands, but I got to watch people who genuinely care about their neighborhood slowly make it better. And as it got better, density came with it. Our neighbor's bungalow was replaced with denser housing. It blocked some sunlight, there were more cars on the street, and it was wonderful. Children were running through the yards, new businesses opened. It's where I got my very first job. And recently, I met someone who told me that while they were visiting Calgary, they stayed in Montgomery, and they loved it so much they moved to this city. So I feel that density didn't ruin my neighborhood, it helped save it. Later in my life, I fell in love with a very handsome man who wanted to do his PhD in Toronto. We lived outside of downtown in a shoebox apartment. Getting around was difficult. Driving and parking were expensive. Traffic was a nightmare. Transit was underserviced, unreliable, and stuck in that very same traffic. We usually rode our bikes, but after a few close calls navigating between protected bike lanes, it was also not ideal. Not being able to navigate a city is deeply isolating. Alas, my very handsome husband was not very rich.
I'm going to allow that spontaneous applause.
So one night, I stayed up late crunching the numbers, and even if we were able to save all of this money for a down payment on a house, we wouldn't be able to afford the monthly mortgage payments on a Toronto mortgage. I looked at renting a two-bedroom apartment, but even that was a financially risky decision in Toronto. I gave up hope of owning a home and starting a family that night, at least in Toronto. That's the path Calgary's on if we do not build a smarter city. After our time in Toronto, we did move back to Calgary. We were able to buy a townhome. It meant everything to me. After years of renting, I could hang a picture, own a pet, and think about starting a family. It was hope, it was stability. This missing middle housing means everything to me. I hope that my voice has been a small part of the chorus telling you how important this problem is to solve. I believe that every councillor knows that, though perhaps you prioritize it differently than I would hope. I've heard that there is a clear majority on this issue, but if you were just counting us like beans, why ask us to speak at all? Housing advocates are talking about whether people can avoid homelessness, gain independence, and build a life. Opponents are talking about shadows, bins, and parking. We can solve those. I don't understand how you can look me in the eye and say, but there's more of them. I see a twinkle in some of your eyes. You believe there's a third magic path that will save you from this difficult decision. Perhaps some of you plan to repeal this now and work towards a solution later. But I caution you, it's always easier to oppose an imperfect solution than to deliver one. If your hearts are set against this updated base district, then I plead that you do not support this now, but build a solution and come back to the public with it. Because I worry when I hear, I support density, but often this becomes a moving goalpost, a promise that a perfect solution is just out of reach. I've not heard of a credible alternative. Local area plans, transitory development, nodes and corridors, we already have all these tools. They are not replacements. I'm happy to expand on why I think these are shortcomings for each, but I'll focus on LAPs for time. I'm more engaged in my community than most people my age, and that has been true my entire life. And I say this with deep respect for those who volunteer in the community, but I've gone into these spaces to be a dissenting opinion, and it is terrifying. Community associations can become insular. By segmenting this problem into smaller and smaller factions, you increase the difficulty to support housing broadly across the city. I've taken multiple days off work to support rezoning. How could I possibly do this on an individual parcel scale? Finally, if communities can't agree to enough growth within the plan, then what? If you force them, it feels like the plan was a foregone conclusion. If you do not, the LAPs failed to deliver the housing required. I hope that you vote no on this repeal and the disjoint amendments that would weaken RCG unless you come back with a plan.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll go to Councillor Chabot for questions for the panel.
Can't remember which presenter it was. It's the first, or no, this gentleman over here didn't get a chance to finish your presentation, I believe, if you don't mind. Sorry, forgive me for forgetting your name.
David.
Thanks.
That'd be an easy name to remember. Yeah, I'll quickly run through this one. And I wanted to, this is an MCG site, just for clarity. So the density is 111 units per hectare. But we ended up designing it in a way that made it look like row housing, just to make it digestible to the community. Very interesting location, no back alley. So we had some things to contend with on that one. We did one initial design, 10 units, no basement, so they were all on grade. And we did it like a U shape, but the neighbors at the back really didn't like it. I met with them at their house and kind of spun the 3D model around until I thought they liked it, and then they appealed the project because working with the planning department, David Down gave some really good advice, but we ended up pushing the building out of the property, or out of the setback. The city was willing to allow us to do that, but that's what we got appealed on. So we waited 6 months, and then we came back with this design. So we tried to not have any bylaw relaxations at all. And again, I worked with the neighbors on the back. There's 3 neighbors at the back and 1 on the side. I met in their homes and again spun the computer or the model in the computer to help them understand. And at that point, the ARP was being approved for 19th Street, and this is now zoned for 4 stories. So then no one appealed it when we went for DP because sorry?
You'd have been allowed to go higher.
Yes, I would have been allowed to go higher. So yeah, the neighbors really liked this design after that. So yeah, and what's interesting about this one is now we have basements, and there's 6 units with 3 secondary suites. But the secondary suites are 2 stories each. So you go into the main floor, and then you can get into the basement for your 2nd story, or you take a set of stairs up. There's nothing in the building code that restricts you from having just a single story for a secondary suite. And one thing I just wanted to add to a previous presenter, I think it was Bold. They were talking about units. I think that's a very interesting conversation because for a lot of these projects, people want to own these homes, right? So if you move into like a garage suite, you'll never own it because it's owned by the owner of the parcel. It's a rental. It can only be a rental. And same with a basement suite. If you have a semi-detached house, 2 basement suites, it can only be a rental. So when you start doing like the row housing, then there's a way to kind of break it apart and turn them into kind of condos, but at a nice scale where people can walk out and have their gardens. And I always put trees in front of all my projects. When I was a student, my first boss, he said, if you want to be a good architect, just learn how to draw a tree. And I've done it ever since. I think it helps. So, yeah.
So this project was not RCG, it was what, MCG?
MCG.
111, MCG
111.
111.
Yeah.
And so that would have allowed you to put secondary suites underneath each unit?
Technically, I mean, we were allowed 12 units with this project size, but the problem is that we didn't have a back alley.
Right.
So we were really restricted because we had to get a waste and recycling vehicle into the site, turn around and back out. So we're using Moloch bins, which is another great product out there. I was hoping the city would someday start collecting them.
And originally it was planned to be slab on grade, but you went with a full basement?
Yeah, like as soon as they got it peeled and lost, then they were like, okay, how can we rethink this project and not lose kind of area? Because they're already going down in density by doing initially 10 instead of 12. Now we were at 6 with the 3 secondary suites. So.
Oh, I'm trying to rationalize this example with the RCG blanket zoning insofar as support, oppose, modify.
For me, I would modify. I like the idea of density, but living in Killarney and seeing how dense they actually are, it's just, for me as an architect, it feels a bit too much. Like, I like breathing space. In school, we were taught about contextual. That's how we designed. So you research your site, you figure it out, you talk to your neighbors, you see what they're living in. That's how you build a community. With the blanket rezoning, a lot of times it feels like, you pull out a tooth and then you add a tooth that doesn't fit. So, I might get a lot of hate mail for this one, but I feel like just there's ways to do it where people will not appeal. And I don't think people actually mind density. But I think what they do mind is large, obtrusive buildings that have horrible materials, no trees, and just not good for their street. Like, if you do a good job in the design, people don't complain.
Having David Down on your team probably helped.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yes, thanks. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, please.
Actually, don't go away there yet, David, if I could. It's interesting to hear your story about it potentially going higher and suddenly people, so maybe actually what we need to do in all this is just zone it 20 meters and everyone gets the exception to 10 and suddenly everything's okay. You mentioned something about single-story basement suite, just really quickly when you were talking to Councillor Chabot there. Can you just expand on that?
I was saying that the building code allows you to do more than a single story for a secondary suite. There's nothing in the code that prevents you from doing a 2-story secondary suite.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Towards the form-based stuff that we were hearing earlier before the break.
Exactly.
I got it. Perfect. Thank you. Just a quick clarification there. And then I'll go to Kendra Wanamaker, please. I love the joy that you brought to this presentation. I also like hearing from folks who are living in these townhouses. I think that that's a really important perspective that we're not hearing enough of, and really appreciate you bringing it. And I really liked you talking about your journey from being a renter to a homeowner, because I think that that really is a crux of what we are dealing with in this. And you talked about hanging a picture on the wall and not having to worry about it, owning a pet. These like simple pleasures that people who own versus renting are often afforded. And I just wondered if you sort of then got into, you've got to get to your notes, but if you can speak we don't get to hear from many folks that have recently been in this transition and made the leap from being a renter into a homeowner, and especially in one of these houses. Can you expand on that a little bit and sort of your experience transitioning between the two worlds?
Yeah, I think, living in Ontario in the rental industry, they have a lot more protections that we don't have in Alberta. I know that's not a city issue, but it just makes owning a pet more difficult because you're not protected in that way. But I found the transition to townhome really nice because I had this built-in community of five families that I got to meet, and we garden together, and they're deeply involved in the community and got me immediately deeply involved in the community association. So it was nice to have that built-in community, and we shovel each other's walks and mow each other's lawns, and it's just been a very nice way to live.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you so much. That concludes this panel. We'll begin assembling a new panel of names that have not been called yet. And we left off on panel 103. So we're going to call 5 names. And if you're in the audience or on the line, please chime in or give me a wave. 103, do we have Beverly Redman? Allison Banks? Aaron Redman? Kevin Hayes or Sean Coley? Sean? Okay. Come on down, Sean. On 104, do we have Dominic Messenchuk? Lori Holdenreed? Nadine Burge-Cumming? On 104, Brian Magdy?
Allison Banks is on the line.
Okay, Allison, please stand by. Do we have Tom Spenceley, 104? Was that you, Tom? 105, Karen McPherson? Come on down, Karen. 105, Elliot McNiven? Laura Comden? Deanna Dubbin? Michael Reed? Michael, come on down. (106) Ariana Kippers. Kelly Pratt. Carolyn Fisher. Okay, come on down, Carolyn. Robert Curry. Catherine Holgate. Okay, come on down, Catherine. And I'll just finish 106 and 107. Do we have Austin Surson or Ross Strong?
Brian Magdy from 104.
Sorry, could you please repeat your name?
Brian Magdy, panel 104.
All right, Brian, please stand by. All right, this one's a little bit bigger, but we'll roll with it. We have Sean from 103, Allison 103, Karen 105, Michael 105, Carolyn 106, Catherine 106, and Brian 104. So, Sean, why don't you start us off?
Greetings, Council. My name is Sean Colley. I'm a resident of Inglewood, and I've been a home builder since 2012. I dipped my toe in missing middle homes back in 2012, and then the Great Flood came, and all of my homes immediately sold, and I was launched as a new builder. I think that first townhouse project was perhaps the most difficult thing I had ever done, and I had a lot of regrets about what happened and how to make it better, and I decided not to do townhousing anymore for quite some years. And I was more of a missing middle hobbyist. It was my favorite form to work in, but also the most difficult and precarious. Now, with all this experience, I think I have tens of thousands of hours of running my job sites. Is it easier now or is it harder? Well, I can tell you it's much, much harder. And the risk is now so significant that I'm counseling the young aspiring builders who have grown up on HGTV and YouTube celebrities to avoid the middle and go right to single homes. And so if you look at, I have a long portfolio of many exceptional homes. My Bridgerland project, unfortunately, 3 years later, you'll notice the red line, that's where the sidewalks go. There isn't any. This home faces Village Ice Cream, and there's many people waiting in summer for their ice cream, looking across at my weeds and lack of sidewalks. I have 2 security deposits on the sidewalks. In order to get an indemnified contractor, I need to pay a 3rd security deposit. And all of the contractors are angling to recoup my deposits as part of their compensation for the sidewalks. And they want to charge me more for 110-foot run of sidewalks than I paid for 3 homes' basement foundations, which included 9-foot tall walls, 8 inches thick, versus a 4-foot by 4-inch thick city sidewalk. And I have since taken out a multi-million-dollar insurance policy to build my own sidewalks, but we weren't able to build them last year. So enough about the sidewalks. Next slide, please. When you get into the housing ladder, what we have is policies that make it much easier and faster to build single homes. So if you look at Calgary's most famous home, which isn't in Calgary, it's that large mansion on the highway, and then you have the apartments. So the large corporations that are building these apartments have plenty of resources to put up the 100-unit buildings that they need to do to survive. So the rest of us are operating somewhere in the middle, and if you look at the amendments that have been proposed, you're simply taking a saw and cutting out the middle rungs. So I don't think repeal is the answer. I think modification is the answer, and we've heard many good ideas on modification, but what we really needed was the city to put resources into a new building bylaw. I think the 2007 building bylaw is quite obsolete, and it was obsolete when I started in this field, and it's even more obsolete now. Next slide, please. We go to what is it like to build a 3-plex? So I have built quite a few 3-plexes. Myself and the Builders Association president, we used to compete for these lots, and we would always be trying to buy them in Killarney. So when you do a 3-plex, the object is to create as much value as possible. Now, Unit 1, the value is in the form of, it's really lost in fees, the DSSP, the dreaded DSSP, and the sidewalks. Now, Unit 2, the value is lost in your time and your appeals and your likelihood of losing the appeal and all the risk associated. So then you're just down to creating value from 1 unit. So what you should really do then is just build 1 unit. So there's simply not enough value created in a 3-plex to sustain the administrative overhead of a house building company, even a small boutique one with very few or no employees. Next slide, please. So we go to the last semi-detached project I was able to build and sell below $1 million each. So that was in Parkdale, Q1, 2022. This project isn't possible any longer due to cost escalation. So I could still build the identical project, I simply couldn't sell it for under $1 million. So we would be into the $1.2 million range, which is getting quite expensive for a semi-detached product. And that leads us to my Inglewood business, which is my primary focus, which is building single homes. So I've built a bunch of these single homes. The city assessed value is around $1.75 million, and if you look at the property tax, utilities, down payment needed, carrying cost is around $7,500 to purchase these. So I put into Google what was household family income needed to qualify to purchase these, and you would need a $300K annual household income basically forever. So that is becoming a little bit too much, but...
Thank you so much. You're just at time, maybe a final sentence to conclude.
All right. So if you look at all the, next slide, all the amendments that have been proposed, they simply all add cost.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll go now to Allison on 103, please.
Jack, it's Tom Spencer. I'm actually online, and I hope I can still speak. Is that okay?
No, we're calling on Allison now, please.
No, but at the end or after, I don't mind.
We've just assembled this panel. If I could return to calling names following the assembling of this panel. We'd like to speak with Allison on panel 103.
That's fine.
Thank you, Allison. Can you please go ahead?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
So, my name is Allison, and I am a resident of Ward 14, and I am opposed to the repeal of blanket rezoning. So, I am a young Calgarian, and I am knowingly living in an abusive environment. I am trapped in that environment because I cannot afford to move out. Rents are too high. Home ownership is incredibly difficult to attain. It's years and years away. And with the repeal of blanket rezoning, I believe that it will take me longer to move out of the environment that I knowingly live in. So many Calgarians have similar situations to mine. There were 6,415 reported cases of domestic violence in 2025 in Calgary, a 7% increase from 2024. Only an estimated 1 in 5 cases are actually reported. When we include non-physical forms of abuse and children who witness violence or abusive behavior in their home, this number goes up so much more. And the more expensive housing is, the harder it is for people like me and for other Calgarians to leave those kind of situations. It creates a sense of desperation, a feeling of being trapped. I have thought about moving into a former meth lab because that would be more affordable in terms of housing. And yes, everything is unaffordable. And with a blanket rezoning, I've seen rates for rent go down, and that made me feel a sense of hope. And in general, I am just scared, and I know other people are feeling similar fears. And yes, I am aware that some people are concerned about things like parking spaces, but I hope that council makes a balanced choice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go now to Karen on 105.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor, members of Council and Administration. I want to thank you all for your time, the extra hours that you've dedicated to the process. And I just want to acknowledge that it takes commitment to support democracy. I really appreciate it. I'm here representing Be the Change YYC, which is in Ward 7. We're a grassroots outreach organization serving unhoused Calgarians. In addition to an overdeveloped sense of fairness, I work in the sector for a personal reason. My son Sam died in 2001 after struggling with trauma, addiction, and for a time with homelessness. I do this work because I don't want other families to go through the same kind of loss. From my experience as an MLA, I know what it looks like when political will translates into positive outcomes for people. And when the lack of attention for an issue means people have to wait even longer for favorable outcomes. At Be the Change, we're on the streets 4 times every week, and we see firsthand how difficult it is for people to survive without stable housing. People like a young man I'll call Shane. In his 20s, living with a brain injury, he collapsed in our parking lot just a block from here last winter. If Shane had stable housing, he could take his medication regularly, manage his condition, and avoid almost dying in frigid weather. But instead, we see people left to survive in conditions that make their health worse and their situations more unstable. And the research is unambiguous. A peer-reviewed Calgary study published in the Canadian Public Policy Journal found that for every dollar invested in stable, supportive housing, the downstream savings to health and justice systems range from over $1 to nearly $3. Homelessness is expensive. Instability is expensive, and we pay for it either way. The question is whether we pay less in housing or much more in emergency rooms, police calls, and human suffering. Even when people are doing everything they can, the wait list for housing can be 3 to 4 years. That's the reality. And right now, more than 6,500 Calgarians are on the wait list for affordable housing. And there are thousands of Calgarians couch surfing, using shelters to stay warm, or living rough. Every tool that increases supply matters. Blanket rezoning is not a complete solution to help end the housing crisis, but it is one of the tools that helps increase housing supply, including more multi-unit housing, more secondary suites, and more attainable rental options. We need more housing options in our city, not fewer. From what we at Be the Change see every day, reducing options only increases pressure on people, on communities, and on emergency systems. Calgary has expanded housing before. Between 2008 and 2018, Calgary's 10-year plan to end homelessness housed nearly 10,000 people through coordinated, sustained effort. And that happened because leaders made deliberate choices to increase housing options, not reduce them. This is a moment like that. City Council has the tools to help address what we are seeing on our streets. I think repeal would be an easy vote, but what I'm asking you to do is the harder thing, to stay at the table, make amendments that address legitimate concerns, and find the tools that are helping people like Shane find a way home.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll go next to Michael, please, on 105.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Michael Reed. I'm the Director of Development for the Alboya Britannia Community Association, and I support the repeal of the blanket upzoning bylaw. I'm here to talk about the Calgary planning process and Calgary slowing population growth. I'm a professional engineer, and I know effective, rigorous planning is critical for the success of any project. Proper housing planning is the process that the developers use to decide what they can build, where, and how, while balancing regulations, design, economics, and community impact. It is controlled by the Calgary Municipal Development Plan, which sets out the regulatory framework for how Calgary will grow. It establishes the strategic direction related to housing forms, types, and affordability. It mandates that 50% of the growth in Calgary should be in the developed areas of Calgary. And I agree with this. We need to put more housing in these critical areas, but the growth should be well planned and completely well thought out and comply to the municipal development plan. The MDP requires that the planning process must follow local area plans, the land use bylaw, including housing zones, the land use redesignation process, and the planning application. Prior to blanket upzoning, we had a successful planning process. The zoning redesignation hearing was often a key component in the planning process. It required the developer to generate a clear description of what was planned. This could be scrutinized by the administration, council, and residents at the public hearing. I believe this increased the quality of the projects being reviewed. However, when blanket upzoning was approved, the planning process was shifted from the city to the developers. This is a new planning process. The developers decide what, when, where to build, as long as it complies with the land use bylaw rules. This is, and they respond to economics and profitability. This isn't a criticism, this is just how the system works. But development becomes random, less coordinated, less predictable, less aligned with infrastructure, less aligned with community context, and it doesn't basically comply with the municipal development plan. You have heard of many examples of how this new planning process has resulted in negative impacts. I won't go into those. It is fundamentally a poor planning process. We should return the planning process to what was working before the blanket upzoning bylaw was passed. I'd like to now talk a little bit about Calgary's growth. This table shows the total population growth in percentage growth per year from the Calgary and Regional Economic Outlook from 2025 to 2030. It shows that Calgary's population growth was below 2% prior to 2022, but then spiked at 6%, almost 3 times higher in 2024. Perhaps this drastic forecast growth influenced the panic and fixation that we needed many more row houses immediately to meet the expected demand increase. However, since 2024, growth has significantly declined and will be back to a much lower growth rate of about 1.3% by the year 2028. We can stop panicking. We don't need the massive number of new row houses. We will need less. So in conclusion, I say that blanket upzoning has not delivered affordability. It has weakened the planning process. It was driven in part by a temporary spike in growth. We need a planning approach that is coordinated, policy-driven, and aligned with real affordability outcomes. I urge you to repeal the blanket upzoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Carolyn on 106, then Catherine after that.
Hi. Hello, Mayor Farkas and councillors. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Calgarians today and this week and last week. My name is Carolyn Fisher. I live in Ward 7, Capitol Hill. I'd like to oppose the repeal of blanket RCG zoning. For the record, I own a 1950s bungalow. There's a 2-story infill next door, actually several, plus several fourplexes on my street. It's fine. Row houses have not ruined my quality of life, nor the character of the neighborhood. Our schools are busy, our community associations are lively, the parks are hopping, and we get to ski in the Confederation Golf Course. So I'm glad to get to know the people and the families and the kids who have moved into the neighborhood. I'm the landlord of a registered basement rental suite. By trade, I'm a children's book author illustrator, and my husband drives a bus for city transit. We would never be able to afford a home in Capitol Hill now, but luckily for us, we bought 28 years ago. Because prices were lower, we had the privilege of choosing our neighborhood, a place that was walkable and bikeable and close to transit and grocery and parks and schools and work. Over the decades that we've lived in our home and rented our suite, hundreds of people have applied to live in our basement, not just students, but families and young working people and more. Some have been so desperate for housing that they have offered to pay 3 months' rent up front. If zoning is repealed, then many lots will be restricted to single-family dwellings. I can see from my years of experience that there are students and young professionals and older workers and single parents and empty nesters for whom a single-family dwelling does not meet their needs. If blanket zoning is repealed and only single-family dwellings are allowed to be built in neighborhoods, and if single-family dwellings cost $750,000 plus, as they do in my neighborhood, then only well-off people or homeowners like me who were lucky enough to buy a long time ago will live here. So you're leaving out whole swaths of Calgarians who do not have the means to buy a single-family dwelling. and possibly not the means to speak at this hearing. So what about the young people? Where will Gen Z and millennials live? What about teachers and nurses and massage therapists and social workers? What about people who don't drive? Does it serve Calgary for the person who cleans the hospital or takes care of toddlers or cuts our hair to have to take a 2-hour bus ride to get to and from work and school? RCG zoning promotes fiscal efficiency. As people are able to gently densify existing neighborhoods with a variety of forms that are walkable and bikeable and close to work and school, then transportation emissions and traffic jams go down. As well, smaller multifamily row homes built on RCG lots have smaller carbon footprints. Not everybody needs nor wants to live in a big house. I ask City Council to protect RCG zoning. By repealing, you're incentivizing sprawl at the cost of providing the missing middle housing in the places where Calgarians really need it. We want a resilient, vibrant city with a variety of home forms to serve all ages and backgrounds, not just now, but for generations. Thank you. And I have one more note, which is that I noticed that Cheryl commented that she would like to be able to develop a backyard suite and a basement suite in her lot. And I would like to make a vote for that too, because I hope to have a multi-generational household at a time when my teenager gets older and my husband and I would like to age in place. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Catherine now on 106, please.
Good evening. Yes, it's been a long day, I'm sure, for all of you. I'm here. I support the full repeal of the rezoning that had been passed. Now, my recollection is that there was some urgency. Oh, thank you. My recollection is that there was some urgency when council pushed it through, moving counter, because of the government money that was available. I don't think that's the reason we should make our decisions. I think people choose their neighborhoods for a variety of reasons, including the location, the nearby amenities, the prices, the character of the neighborhood, and in some cases for investment potential. And I believe that the rezoning impacted people differently depending on the reason of their purchase. Those who bought with the intention possibly of an increase in value, for example, on 17th Avenue, which borders on my community, Glendale, their houses have gone up dramatically in value. Those who bought because they liked the R1 zoning and liked the space and liked getting to know their neighbors and living in a really, like a little small community where we actually celebrate one another's birthdays. We know everybody in the neighborhood. It's a very pleasant neighborhood. But already there have been bungalows torn down and multifamily units built. And now, I understand the one on 17th Avenue where 3 houses were replaced with a 100-unit apartment because 17th Avenue is busy. But what is the impact of that on our parking and our infrastructure, the water? I mean, we've had a lot of water main problems in Calgary, and especially in the older neighborhoods. You know, one area within Glendale has twice since Christmas had broken water mains and had to go get water. What's going to happen when that 100-unit apartment building is actually rented and occupied? I don't think there's been enough consideration to the parking issues where there's one parking space for every 2 units, and also the water and the sewer services, as well as the canopy because all the trees are gone. Okay, now, when the zoning changed, as I said, it had different impacts for different people. For many people, it's almost like an expropriation. When you take away someone's house, you compensate them. When you take away the quality of the property and the home that was most important to them, and it takes something away as well. And there's no way to compensate people for that. The character of the neighborhood is lost. Someone else had mentioned earlier about all the people that are moving. It's happening in all of the older communities that were R1, that have single-family houses. People are moving out because they're afraid of what's happening. Now, there were some very interesting presentations this afternoon that I listened to. One lady talked about the equity element of blanket rezoning. I have to disagree with her. I think that equity that would have been equitable had everybody had the same original starting point. But because in R1 zoning is very different than certain other areas of the city, the blanket rezoning really hits the R1 neighborhoods far more than it does the ones that already allowed for more development. Okay, I was very impressed by the presentation by the lady architects this afternoon. I thought the contextual idea is very important, and I've heard several people tonight mention that. So I'm not opposed to density. In fact, the Glendale Community Association at the time of our local area plan, which was thrown away when the new blanket rezoning came in, but it had proposed to have density on the peripheral roads, on 45th Street, on 17th Avenue, on 26th Avenue, and they had done calculations and recommendations that this sort of a development could reach the objective of density without changing all the single-family residences within the community and without changing just the texture of the community. So I've heard people say, oh, but actually, I was at a public hearing earlier for our ward, and there were these young people coming in and saying, but I should be able to buy a home in the neighborhood I grew up in. My children certainly couldn't have afforded that, and I wouldn't have expected to as a child. It's fairly normal for young people to buy their first home.
Thank you so much.
Ideal community.
You're just at time, but maybe a final sentence to conclude your thoughts.
I was just saying that people don't always get their ideal home the first time around. I don't think any of us got exactly what we wanted the first time or in the location we would have preferred.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll go now to Brian on 104 to wrap this panel.
Brian Magdy, panel 104. I am in favor of fully repealing blanket rezoning, resetting the zoning to what it was before blanket rezoning, and engaging with Calgarians to develop local area plans to guide thoughtful growth. I appreciate this opportunity to address Mayor Farkas and City Councilors to express my viewpoint. Thank you. I also spoke at the public hearing approximately 2 years ago, and at that time stated that I was in opposition of the blanket rezoning. I first moved to Calgary a little over 42 years ago. I have lived in many housing forms, apartments, a condo, townhomes, and several single-family homes. I've also lived in various communities throughout Calgary. The choices I made depended upon my needs, wants, and personal situation over the years. I currently reside in the community of Alboya in Ward 8. With blanket rezoning, there are no longer any communities or neighborhoods in Calgary that are zoned predominantly for single-family dwellings only. This is saying that no one should have the choice to live in a planned, low-density neighborhood, regardless of their preference and desired lifestyle. Notably, it has eliminated the certainty of use in past RC1 contextual dwelling districts and has many residents on edge in anticipation of forthcoming densification of their neighborhood and streets. I recognize the need for various types of housing forms, and I agree that it is critical that these options are made available for the citizens of Calgary. I also agree that densification is a key component in Calgary's housing strategy. However, I believe that blanket rezoning is not an effective and efficient solution. It is important that a solution is developed that allows Calgary to continue to offer a diverse range of housing alternatives while still promoting greater density. A more effective approach is targeted, data-driven planning, concentrating density along transportation, transit corridors, and activity center nodes, supported by detailed multi-community local area plans. Calgary is a terrific city and is ranked as one of the most livable in the world. I would like to see it remain that way. I believe that not repealing blanket rezoning will have a long-term negative impact on the quality of life and choices of lifestyles offered in Calgary. I reiterate that I am for the proposed repealing of blanket rezoning and urge you to vote to repeal it, as you have similarly heard from other concerned and caring citizens of Calgary. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This concludes this panel. Before I go to Councillor Clark to start us off, real quick, who is the gentleman who spoke saying they were just a second or two late for me calling 103 through 106?
That was me, Tom Spenceley.
All right, Tom, please stand by. You'll be on our next panel, but it might be a while after some of the questions from council here. Secondly, Sorry.
Panel 101, Sylvia Kowalewski on the phone.
Could you repeat that name?
Sylvia Kowalewski, 101.
Okay, we will see if we're able to accommodate you tonight. I can't promise based on the alternation of the panel, but we will do our best.
Hi, I'm on panel 96. I know that there are other callers on the line who are also hoping to speak.
I know, guys, I opened the door, but we just have to conclude this panel. We're not calling or assembling other panels. I just wanted to hear from that one specific gentleman. Just for fairness here, we have to go in the order that they're called. So with that, just out of fairness, I know this is a challenging environment for us, given that we have many hundreds of people who are signed up, but not all the names were there. So again, thank you so much. Tom, please stand by for the next panel. Secondly, Allison, Karen, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your personal stories, and I think your participation as well as others really emphasize that what we're talking here, housing, speaks to home, speaks to family, speaks to many other challenges that we're experiencing in the community right now. And just wanted to take a moment to remind you and everybody else that's present or might be watching today through the proceedings that we can all call the distress line at any time for help. The number is 403-266-4357 or 266-HELP. And that help is available 24 hours. So again, I didn't want that comment to slide without the recognition, and thank you for your vulnerability, Karen, for being here and sharing what you did. We're going to go over to Councillor Clark, please.
Sir, I just wanted to speak with Mr. Coley. Good evening, sir.
Greetings.
Thank you for joining us here. You were just kind of cut off there towards the end of your presentation. I just wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to conclude.
Well, if we go to my final slide, I was just going to mention some of the trade-offs and how R1 areas have the largest lots that I would most like to build in, and the R2 areas have too much development, and I was chased out of Killarney for that reason. It was just overwhelming. And then if we eliminate basement suites, we cut out the market-driven, most low-cost rentals, and that would be a huge loss to the rental market. And for me, I don't purchase homes on nodes and corridors. I only purchase homes where my clients want to live, and my clients want to live in the heart of communities, and they're willing to pay tremendous amounts of money to live in the heart of the community. And so that's where I'm sort of obligated to build where they wish to work. And if everyone points to these abandoned gas stations, and I find that to be bad faith negotiation, because you're bargaining with a gas station, but you're not bringing any capital to clean the gas station. And if you have a community with 500 homes on it and you say, well, let's go to the gas station that's abandoned and put 100 homes, we've increased the density of our community by 25%, so now we're good for the next generation. So that's the kind of, I think, unaccountable comment that we're getting in the inner city. And when we look at the brownfield, every time we do a new sprawl community outside of the ring road, we delay each brownfield project by another few years.
You're speaking my language. I think brownfield is very much the next step for us.
Sorry,
go ahead.
So the final one is a 1,000 square foot home on a 6,000 square foot lot in the best neighborhood isn't really a good use of our land. And I would really like to push for some R1 reform if we go back to R1, where I could build a cottage cluster on the R1 areas, and maybe that would be acceptable to the neighbors.
Could you describe a cottage cluster?
I would try to build 4 cottage-style homes on one lot with a shared garage, but I would try to do them in ways that the building department would object to, and the project would die at the planning stage.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of that actually through the hearings. I believe you came forward as a neutral party, or what was your standing on this issue?
I'm opposed to a full repeal, and I would like to see technical modifications with a technical working group, including the Builders Association, and any change to the building bylaws need to be tested for cost benefit.
So a little bit more engagement with the industry itself, engaging with these policies.
I think you'll find that the Inner City Builders Association has the builders on it who have the most experience building in the middle form.
Yeah, very good, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. McPherson. Hello.
Hi.
It's been a while. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for your time, of course, and the mayor's already thanked you for providing us with some human insight. I wondered, as we approach this work, I mean, the decision in front of us, you've already highlighted, it's quite big, and there's a lot of dynamics, and what's the most courageous thing we can do? Either way, non-market housing has to become a priority in our pursuit of the future of the city. And I wondered if you just had any feedback about that from your position, how we could better support that as part of blanket rezoning or on the other side of this decision.
I think there's a whole array of different kinds of housing that would really help alleviate the suffering of people who are unhoused. Transitional housing, supportive housing, and accessible housing, you know, both low cost as well as physically accessible. A lot of the folks that we serve do suffer with some sort of disability or do live with a disability. So making sure that people are going to be successful and not to have a whole lot of constraints, putting housing first rather than a behavior on behalf of the person that needs to be housed. I think all of those are really important, as well as tools like the blanket rezoning. The more housing stock that's available, the less pressure there is on the lower levels, and the fewer people we see knocked into homelessness because the market has simply become too expensive for them.
And we've seen those individuals come forward over the course of this hearing, right? I mean, sort of advocating for themselves with there's no real chance of them accessing this kind of housing, but its very existence, they think, sort of protects them or creates a better sense of security for their place and their housing. So yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Councillor Pantzopoulos, please.
Thank you so much. Ms. Holgate. Catherine? Oh, hi. Thanks. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your presentation, particularly around the commentary. And I wanted to commentary around if we were to build on 17th, on 26th, on 45th in your community, that would be sufficient to meet the goals and objectives that were identified. Can you just expand on that? Who told you that? Where did that information come through?
Oh, the community association submitted that plan at the time of the local area plan.
Yeah.
And then the local area plan was shelved because of the rezoning. And it was submitted to the city, but apparently it wasn't considered.
Oh, okay, you made a comment that you were told by somebody, that's what I heard, that if we were to have that density on 17th, 26th,
and 45th.
And 45th, thank you, 17th, 26th, and 45th, that would meet the density objectives. Yes. So was that through communications, or did the community association do that analysis?
The community association did it. They submitted it to the city, and they submitted it as part of the local area plan.
Perfect. So
actually, there's a board member from the community association who might have more information if you need it.
You know, I definitely will at the break for sure. So the experience with the LAP, obviously, that was the community supported. That's where density made a lot of sense. If we had to pick and choose on those, I'll call them nodes and corridors, or the density, 17th, 26th, 45th, Glendale, that's where it makes sense for you and your neighbors.
Yes, they already have heavy traffic. Yeah. You know, it's not the same character as the other parts of the community.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that presentation. I definitely will take you up on that offer at the break. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Worship. Ms. Banks, are you still on the line with us?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you, Ms. Banks?
Hello? Yes.
Hello.
Hi, I'm on the line.
Thank you very much. Really want to thank you for sharing your presentation with us today. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I listened very carefully to what it was that you had to say, and I'm wondering if we might be able to follow up with you, and if so, if you'd be willing to reach out to the women in my office at Ward 4 at calgary.ca to see what we might be able to do to assist.
Sure, maybe. We'll see.
That'd be Ward 4 at calgary.ca.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banks.
All right, this concludes that panel. And we had called up to from 103 through 106, where for an upcoming panel, this is likely to be the last one for the evening before we break for 9:30. And because tomorrow and Wednesday are occupied with other predetermined council business, Thursday at 9:30 a.m. will be the continuation of this public hearing. So we'll need a motion to that effect before we break, but just for the members of the public who might be on the line or here in person, this will be the final panel for tonight. So we have Tom Spenceley there from 104. He'll be the first in there. I'm going to go back to, it was panel 81 that we ended off on. Do we have Brooklyn Jansen with us from 82? Bonnie Petrovich? Al Chappell?
Yes.
Bonnie, is that you?
Bonnie, yes.
Okay, Bonnie, please stand by. Do we have Anita Showa from 83? Bill Woodward? John Williams? Come on down, John. David Cumming, 84. Clint Sugar. Mark Gottlieb.
Here.
Was that you, Mark?
This is me, yes, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Please stand by. 84, Mariana Salazar. 84, Cornelia Wiebe.
I'm here.
Thank you, Cornelia. Please stand by. And then we'll accommodate one more. Do we have Darren Plansky? Dylan Proctor?
I'm here online, thanks.
Sorry, was that you, Darren?
Yes, it was me, thanks.
Thank you very much. So this will be our final panel for the evening. It'll be Tom, then Bonnie, John, Mark, Cornelia, then Darren. All right, Tom, why don't you jump into it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do apologize for earlier when I pushed the wrong button to say I was present. But nevertheless, I'm Tom Spenceley, and I'm a resident of Ward 8. And for the record, I am for repealing this, making this zoning problem go away. Although I think after having heard a lot of the correspondence throughout the day and in general, I do believe that it might be advantageous to put some of these new or these existing ones in the bylaw around the various LRT stations and so forth, where there's high density. Invading into or putting multi-family housing in neighborhoods is not necessarily the best plan, but you've heard all the reasons why that's the case. One of the strong points I want to drive home is the fact, and it's been stated a few times throughout the day, is that we told stories back then, and then council voted it in despite that, and there was a lot of fanfare, people against it. After which, a number of councillors said, wait till the next election and see what happens. Well, we did, and we saw what happened. Many of the people who were causing or were voting for this were gone, and many of the people that are supporting the thing are gone, and many who are against it are on council now. I really hope that the people in council who are for it, because you do represent the majority, still stick to your guns, because as I heard in an earlier correspondence today, there's a certain trust that people put in people to abide by what they say they're going to do, and I believe they should. And so that's point number one. The other point I want to raise deals with that of not so much city council, but the people in the planning department from the administration side. We've had meetings called where they say they want us to get into one of the various meeting places or auditoriums or whatever down in the either at our Mount Royal facility or the one down the hill, and they want to tell us, they want to look for our input and how we think things should be, how we can make this better for everybody in the city. They're not interested in input. You get down there and they simply dictate this, or they tell us what they want to do. They're not interested in hearing what you have to say. Point number two is that they now, or they've, as you know, with the Banff Trail issue, they actually changed the designation of the particular area under question so that you couldn't build a single-family home there. It all had to be multifamily. Moreover, they go around in our particular area, not that it's all about us here in Mount Royal, but the thing they've gone down and said, look, we're going to change the designation of one particular property to direct control because we don't want to have to deal with the issue of restrictive covenants, even though we've had one in place here for 110 years. So the problem is if you're going to try and make changes, it's best done with a stick or with a carrot, not a stick, and work with people, because anybody will entertain things. But I don't believe that that the way that the planning people and working are necessarily in our best interest. They're self-serving. The last point, of course, is when they make announcements that I believe council should be making, or in particular the mayor, when they suggest that the city is going to lose their federal grants if we don't go ahead and repeal the law, or rather carry on with the law, not repeal it, or the bylaw rather. So again, a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. It's inappropriate and it needs to be brought into focus. So in summary, I'm not totally against doing stuff in a limited basis, but I don't think we need to destroy any neighborhood, and of course, in particular, neighborhoods that have historic value. But that's selfish, and I don't need to make it all about our area, but in areas in general. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll go to 82 with Bonnie, then 83, John, after that. Please go ahead, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mayor Farkas. Apologies, I'm full of head cold, so I'm pretty nasally. My name is Bonnie Petrovic. I live in Ward 4. I'm in favor of repealing blanket rezoning without amendment and requesting a return to prior. I'm not a subject matter expert. I am, however, a long-time proud property owner of what has seemingly become the targeted family bungalow. I raised my daughter in this home, and I am able to age in place, yet as time passes, I feel this is not your plan for me. There were many common themes across the presenters this week I would like to highlight. Just 4 themes in the closing hours of this hearing. Number 1, caring. I'm on panel 82. Every single individual that came before me made the time, had the energy to do this again, or could navigate your system to get themselves on the presenters list, all with passion, articulate, and meaningful dialogues. That is impactful caring across all. A characteristic of this city that I moved to in 1983 that hasn't disappointed me. Number 2, affordability. As identified in the 2024 plan, was not a result of this specific bylaw. Non-market housing on the scale required to make an impact in our city was never realized at the same rate as towerplexes for profit. You know it. There needs to be more work done on that side of this, whatever it looks like. And that's resounding. That's not just a Calgary problem. That's a Canada-wide problem. Number 3, trust. I believe the most important theme of the week, a word that keeps circling the wagon again and again. The people of Calgary are counting on you to follow through on this repeal. No smoke and mirrors, rather action to pledge. Personally, as the week progressed, I struggled with whether or not being present at this proceeding would be meaningful. I feel more than a few felt the same in their absences as their names were called. And as I watched the news last week to hear a few of you speak to your interest to revisions not openly communicated before this hearing, and not repealing as pledged in the election, my heart sank. There is more on the table here than mid-block developments, folks. I made a deliberate decision to buy the home I'm in 42 years ago because of a certain set of rules and restrictions. I trusted that contract was binding. I have found the past 2 years extremely stressful every time I see a for sale sign. I never used to worry about coming home, and now I have lost trust that you are true stewards of the communities that you represent. I was trusting in you to follow through on the election position. You have been given a chance to reset the bar, yet I can clearly see and hear this is not the shared objective by all. And finally, number 4, density. You've heard it from Calgarians. We are aligned on the need for density, just not your approach. I heard over and over increases to density need be strategic, balanced, thoughtful, and deliberate, respecting the unique qualities of each community. And I appreciate the city's operating budget is based on ratepayers, and you need more of them, but you each know there are other ways to achieve this. Changes to the TOD, encouraging enhanced commercial residential builds on the TOD, and commuter arteries like the recent co-op number 2 on 16th Avenue, as an example. In closing, I think most politicians would be concerned about the message from the people impacted and say, what I am doing is clearly not resonating with my stakeholders, so it's time to do something else. It's why we are all here. I urge you to repeal without amendment, pause, and come back. Together, we are stronger, and we can do much better for Calgary. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to John next, please. And then Mark after that.
Thank you. I believe there's some visual aids. I'm not sure if they're available, but you can just keep cycling through them as I present. My name is John Williams. I'm panel 83. I'm a Ward 4 resident. Mayor Farkas and Council, thank you for the opportunity to present. It's very important that we participate in our democracy, and I appreciate having the opportunity to do so. I am a born and raised Calgarian. I'm very proud of Calgary as a city, and I believe in constant improvement. I'd have to say we haven't seen constant improvement in the last few years, and we need to do better. Before I start, I took exception to the mandatory endorsement statement as a condition of participating in this statutory public hearing. This requirement is constitutionally vulnerable, legally questionable, inconsistent with democratic norms. I'm optimistic with our new mayor and council. We have 10 new members, and I feel much more comfortable with what we are moving forward with today compared to what we were left with before. This is a massive improvement over our former 2 mayors.
I'm just going to jump in and ask that I've been asking presenters to really just stay focused on the policy, not go after any individuals. Let's just get to the merits of the blanket rezoning repeal as proposed rather than bringing commentary on identified individuals, please.
Okay. Fair enough. I hope to see this council take full control of this oversized administration and to see that the tail no longer wags the dog. You guys are in control. Own it. Do it for your fellow Calgarians, and let's do it right. We can't be bowing to the federal government in Ottawa either. That was a disaster. Don't let them dictate what happens in our city, because Ottawa sure as heck doesn't know what Calgary needs. Now on to blanket upzoning. This is not just a simple planning issue. This is about democracy, ethics, integrity, and the future of Calgary. You've inherited a decision, probably the worst decision in the history of this council. A decision that was imposed, not earned, a decision that went directly against what Calgarians clearly and overwhelmingly said. Today is your opportunity to consider fixing it. This was a democratic failure. Let's be very clear about the public record. The first hearing, which I participated in, had over 100 hours of in-person presentations, over 730 speakers presented in person. Roughly 65 to 70% of those people were clearly opposed. Nearly 90% of written submissions were opposed as well. That was not a divided public. It was overwhelmingly opposition. Yet the policy was approved anyway. Why? This is unacceptable. That's not how democracy works. This is a complete disregard for Calgary taxpayers. Public hearings are not a box to check. They're meant to mean something. This was a slap in the face to Calgarians. Let's look at some of the core principles. It's not about growth. Calgarians support growth and reasonable growth. This is about how growth is forced onto communities. This policy removed the voice of communities and citizens. It removed future hearings. It removed meaningful input. It replaced participation with pre-approval, and that is a fundamental shift away from democratic planning. Good planning is careful. We actually had it. That's why we have the Calgary we have. It was destroyed by blanket upzoning. It's contextual. It represents neighborhoods, history, culture, and community. Blanket upzoning does none of that. It destroys all of the above. It applies one rule across the entire city, and we know that doesn't work, regardless of infrastructure, regardless of character, regardless of impact. This is not planning. This is uncontrolled deregulation. Let's look at the infrastructure reality. Our infrastructure is already strained. Problems have intensified exponentially with negligence on the care of our feeder main and water mains, no inspections, no maintenance. We've seen a catastrophic failure of this feeder main. We can't afford any more messes like this. Several times. The electricity grid, if we want to put charging stations for vehicles and more houses, the grid cannot handle this. Who's going to pay for this? Parking, or the complete lack thereof. Calgarians have more cars per capita than most cities in North America. That's not going to change anytime soon. No climate emergency hoax or ridiculous climate policy will ever change that. Calgarians are the way they are. Traffic congestion, pressure on services, roads destroyed with all the installation of deep services. I invite you to come for a ride down my road in Winston Heights. And if the wheels stay on your car, I'd be pretty impressed because it's pretty bad. And this is becoming quite prolific. Somebody's got to pay for all that. The policy accelerates density everywhere with no guarantees of upgrades. The infrastructure systems support that growth is not necessarily going to be there. The cost will fall on the taxpayers. Let's look at the community impact. Look what's actually happening on the ground. Homes are being replaced, not with family housing, but with density at all costs. 2 homes become 4, 4 become 6, 6 become 8, and 8 become 12. And what do we lose? We lose the fabric of our very city that makes Calgary one of the best places to live in this world. Let's not change this. The fabric that makes Calgary the most livable city in the world is what we had. It was the concise and clear and delicate planning that we built this city that we're proud of. Trees.
Thanks,
privacy.
John. You're just at time. Maybe a final sentence to conclude your thoughts.
And I've got a couple solutions to offer somebody wants to offer. So, look, it's on you guys to fix this. And let's rebuild the trust. We can tear this down. We can rebuild it with a lot further, involvement with the community. And let's do it right. There's no one-stop fix, but let's do it properly.
Thank you so much. We'll go next to Mark on 84, then Cornelia after that, please. Please go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Mark Gottlieb, and I am advocating on behalf of my wife and myself. Thank you for bringing this issue to the fore so quickly. We strongly support the full repeal of the blanket rezoning bylaw without amendment. My wife and I have lived in Valley Ridge for more than 25 years. We, like most home buyers and renters, bought our home, our forever home, not only because of the house, but the community, its character, location, and beauty. I doubt that we would have bought the house if it was located elsewhere, much less in a hodgepodge of less than thoughtful development. Our homes and communities are the most fundamental and profoundly important investments most of us will make in our lives. In light of the major land use and social policy changes brought about by the bylaw, it should not have been considered in the absence of a binding referendum if permitted by the province, or if not, a plebiscite. Instead, with the inducement of $244 million from the federal government, previous council passed the bylaw in defiance of a significant, visible, and vocal majority of Calgarians. That is not democracy. A lack of due diligence and good judgment have marked previous councils, from the Green Line to persistent water feeder main problems to blanket rezoning, which the last council should have foreseen would end up here not even 2 years later. About 5 years ago, our then neighbor applied for a development permit to build a backyard suite consisting of a double-car garage with living quarters on top. Our street was zoned RC2. In our view and the view of many of our neighbors, the development would have degraded the character and functionality of our street. It also would have set a terrible precedent. We opposed the application. I don't believe any of our neighbors supported it. I was one of the people spearheading the opposition. The city's planning department was very respectful in our dealings. It listened to our concerns. It gave us due process. Ultimately, it denied the application. From what I've heard during this meeting, due process seems to be missing in the application of the blanket rezoning bylaw. Had my neighbor's application been made today, I suspect, to my chagrin, it may have had a greater chance of success. My research suggests that Calgary's population is expanding by 60 to 90,000 people a year, and for prices to come down, we must build 30 to 50,000 units a year. In typical years, we build 12 to 18,000 units annually. There are two roadblocks to increasing our annual build of residential units. In 2025, Calgary had about 5,300 job vacancies in trades-related occupations. That's almost 1 in 4 job openings. Labor shortages remain one of the biggest constraints on construction. The other problem is that we live in a capitalist society. Governments should have capped the price of residential units a long time ago. Without price control, we have supply, demand, cost, profit, and greed. My wife and I bought an apartment condominium in Glenbrook in 1978 for $40,000. A friend just sold her plain Jane half duplex in Mount Pleasant for $735,000. My understanding is that a brand new fourplex also often sells for between $400,000 and $500,000. Hardly affordable for many. Dotting the landscape with scrambled development and the attendant problems of structure, aesthetics, and function is not the answer. My research has revealed that we have a restrictive covenant registered on title to our property and other properties on our street that only allows one single detached home. The bylaw seeks to vitiate the restrictive covenant. I echo panel 25's Brian Weatherall's comment about the promise that had been broken by the passage of the bylaw. As restrictive covenants run with the land, if a development application was made to build multifamily dwellings on a single lot on my street against which the covenant on my property has been registered, I would help organize a joint or class action for an injunction to prohibit the build and for damages. I think this is already being done in some Calgary communities. Thank you very kindly for permitting me to speak today. We respectfully ask Council to restore our trust in this government by repealing the bylaw and by not advancing the proposed amendments which in sum don't mitigate our concerns. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. We will go now to...
I was panel 84, but missed calling in.
We will conclude this panel and we'll see if we have time before the 9:30 hard stop. I apologize.
Okay,
Our procedure bylaw calls for us to end our proceedings at 9:30. We will go now to Cornelia, please, on 84.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Cornelia Wiebe. I live in Ward 8, and I am speaking today in support of repealing blanket rezoning, no amendments, full repeal. I want to start by sharing why I'm speaking today. I ran as a municipal candidate in the last election here in Calgary, and while I'm no longer on the ballot, I feel a continued responsibility to represent and share the voices of the residents I spoke with, specifically in Ward 8, the majority of whom supported candidates like me, whose platform priority was to repeal the blanket rezoning bylaw. I believe those voices deserve to be heard in this conversation. Over the course of the campaign, I had the privilege of speaking with thousands of residents. The number one identified priority was to repeal blanket rezoning. What I heard repeatedly from Ward 8 residents was not opposition to change, but concern about how this change was being implemented. Blanket rezoning introduced a one-size-fits-all approach across communities that vary significantly. Each neighborhood has its own context, its own infrastructure, character, and with that, residents who have made long-term investments there. Residents highlighted they felt the engagement process lacked meaningful consultation. There was a sense that decisions were being made to communities rather than with them. That disconnect has real consequences, not just for planning outcomes, but for trust in local government. We can do better, and more importantly, we can rebuild trust. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about zoning. It is about governance. It's about whether residents feel heard, respected, and included in decisions that shape their daily lives. When the majority of Ward 8 voters supported candidates who prioritized repealing this bylaw, that is not something we can overlook. It is a clear democratic signal. It tells us that the mandate of voters is to repeal blanket rezoning. As someone who ran for office, I take that seriously, and that's why I'm speaking today, to carry forward the voices of those Ward 8 residents who made it clear through their participation and their votes that repealing the blanket rezoning bylaw was priority number one. Their engagement did not end on Election Day, and neither should the consideration of the issue they rallied around. In closing, I ask that this council take the first step towards rebuilding trust with Calgarians and fully repeal the blanket rezoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to round off the panel. 85, Darren, please.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. My name is Darren Polanski. I'm a registered architect, and I've worked in the residential sector here in Calgary for, I guess, just about 18 years. I'm a resident of Ward 6. I oppose repealing blanket rezoning. Until there is a clear path forward with a plan to ensure development that can keep pace with growth and address the public concerns about quality, I believe it should remain in place. Just kind of at the risk of going off my script here, I just kind of want to make a comment. I've been listening to a lot of commentary over the past week, and there's kind of a common theme that's popping up from the public, and that's a concern about quality and quality about the built form. And I think what's missing from this process is essentially that is a discussion, not a discussion, but a framework about the build form, the quality, and what actually is built on site in relation to its massing. And I believe the architects at Old Workshop earlier today did a very good job articulating how a framework could be set in place to mitigate some of the concerns that the public might have about established neighborhoods and densification. Back to my script. I'm currently working on a research project between the relationship between housing and access to transit in suburban areas. And I think there's some clear connections between that and this discussion about growth in established communities. Blanket rezoning allows incremental, context-sensitive densification in established communities. It does not guarantee affordability, but it enables more housing choice and supply, which we need. It helps us use infrastructure we've already paid for, roads, utilities, amenities, and schools, rather than expanding outward and building new. Many established neighborhoods have underutilized infrastructure, especially roads built for higher volumes than they carry today, schools facing declining or aging populations. I recently defended an SDAB case in the established community of Cambridge Heights for a semi-detached home with lower suites. This project undertook a public engagement process with the community association, and the owner had discussions with the neighbors. There was discussion earlier about engagement would suggestively eliminate the need for SDAB or somehow, would reduce the pressure on that process. But despite engagement and communication with the neighbor, they simply just didn't want something built next to them. So in the end, they ended up appealing it. There was concern from these neighbors about single-family character of the neighborhood, even though the neighborhood had multifamily in it since the 50s. There's actually essentially just a general misunderstanding of what RCG actually allows, and some claimed high-density developments would spread throughout the community, when in fact we were just proposing a low-density semi-detached with some suites. This misunderstanding and fear has created an expensive appeal for my client, an individual who simply wanted to provide units for his extended family while still living in his home. Today, 76% of Calgarians live in auto-centric suburbs. That's 1.4 million people and about 480,000 dwelling units in the auto-centric suburbs. 10 years from now, we could grow to 1.6 million people and 820,000 dwelling units in the auto-centric neighborhood. Also, today, 78% of workers commute by car. That's 680,000 vehicles, but in 10 years, that could grow to 840,000 vehicles. We cannot stop or slow suburban growth. However, we can reduce the onus placed on new road construction and life cycle maintenance by allowing densification in our established neighborhoods. Calgary is already planning tens of billions of dollars in new suburban infrastructure over time. $20 billion is allotted for new neighborhoods. That does not include life cycle maintenance, and this money is paid by all Calgarians through taxation. Growth is coming either way at our current rate. 400,000 more people are predicted to arrive in Calgary in the next 10 years. That's roughly 150,000 new homes needed, and 110,000 of those will be in the auto-centric suburbs. The question isn't not if we grow, it's where and how efficiently we grow. Not everyone can or should live in an established neighborhood, but stopping gentle density pushes more growth outward, increases the cost, traffic, and infrastructure burden that everyone pays for. We should allow balanced development across the entire city. If council chooses to repeal, it must replace with something meaningful. Faster, more predictable land use approvals, dwellings as permitted use, looking at parking requirements again, and a more focused development permit appeals.
Thank you, sir. You're just at time, but perhaps a final sentence to conclude your thoughts.
Perfect. I think that's fine. I just encourage council to take your time, study the impacts carefully, and fully understand the interconnectedness between housing and infrastructure, traffic improvements, and financial responsibility. Thank you.
All right. There was somebody who spoke up on panel 84, but we had missed them. What's your name?
Yes, it's Clint Shirker.
Okay, Clint, just one moment, please. Colleagues, we are at our stop time. Is there anyone who is willing to propose a motion to suspend? Madam Clerk, is a suspension of the procedure bylaw to allow us to conclude this panel?
It's to modify
the time of recess?
Modify the time of recess to commence at the conclusion of either this panel or a new panel or whichever council would like to do.
Okay, colleagues, I suggest that we push a couple minutes late tonight to allow us to hear from Clint and to finalize the questions from council for the panel. So if you vote yes to this, we will continue for, I'm guessing, 15 to 20 minutes more. If you vote no to this, we will sort of end our proceedings right here. This motion, I believe, requires a 2/3 vote in order to pass.
That's correct.
So this is on the screen. Is there any of you who would like to move this motion? This is moved by Councillor Kelly. Seconded by Councillor Chabot. On this, Councillor Johnston, you have a request to speak?
Sorry, I'm just checking the schedule for tomorrow. We have regular council at 9:30 tomorrow, right?
That's right, yep.
Yeah, I'm going to say let's finish this sooner than later tonight, but because we have to be back tomorrow morning early, so.
Okay. All right, the motion's on the floor. Council let's push through and accommodate one more. I urge you to support this, but obviously you don't have to. Are we okay? I'm going to do a voice vote. You probably guys, everyone doesn't have e-scribe out. Are we all in favor? Any opposed? Councillor McLean is opposed, and that motion is carried. So, Clint, it's your lucky day, my friend. We've made a very rare exception for you, sir. So
thank you.
make your time count. You got 5 minutes, although that's a limit, I'll say.
This should just be a couple minutes. My name is Clint Scherger. I represent myself. I support repealing the blanket rezoning. I'm going to start by reading what I presented in April 2024. I'm a 50-year resident of Calgary and 32-year resident of the community of Lake Bonavista in Ward 14. I attended Councillor Damon's April 9th open house at the Lake Bonavista Community Centre, where he faced great opposition to the blanket rezoning from the attendees. I'm here in an attempt to persuade other councillors to vote no to the proposed blanket rezoning. I lived in Lake Bonavista in my teens and early 20s before moving away from my parents' home. I've lived in apartments and starter homes in other communities, and when the time came to be more established, I chose to return to Lake Bonavista and its R1 single-family dwelling zoning. If I wanted to live in a community with condominiums, rural houses, and multiple family dwellings, I would have bought a house in such an area. I paid a premium to buy in Lake Bonavista, which was historically zoned as R1, but was somehow changed to RC1 in the 2010s, which I'm kind of okay with. I am deeply opposed to blanket rezoning to RCG, and especially deeply opposed to rezoning my community to RCG. As an ex-technician, this all reminds me of something that works in theory, but fails in practical application. The group has come up with a plan that works in theory, but failed to take into consideration extreme changes it is making to historically R1 communities. Please vote no on blanket rezoning. So that's what I said in 2024. However, after 736 speakers with 458 against blanket rezoning, 224 for blanket rezoning, and 51 neutral, the City Council voted 9-6 to pass blanket rezoning. This left many people scratching their heads, but fortunately the present council is readdressing the blanket rezoning. I'm now a 52-year resident of Calgary, 34-year resident of Lake Bonavista, and still deeply opposed to blanket rezoning of RCG. Please repeal the decision on this point made by the previous council. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll go to questions from council members. I think Deputy Mayor, you're first up.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the speakers. It's not a question. I just wanted to note that we have been indicating to speakers that attacks on individuals or previous councils is not appropriate. There were some other examples of this in the last panel of accusing administration of, you know, things bordering on corruption or criminal activities, and I just think that we need to call that out as well, because that's not appropriate. Administration acts on the direction of council, and they do the work that they're directed to do, and those aspersions don't contribute towards making a decision on this policy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to consider that a point of privilege, and well taken.
Okay, I have a point of privilege as well.
Over to, okay, Councillor Johnston on point of privilege, please.
Yeah, this is the rawest form of democracy, and I feel people should have a right to come and express themselves. I don't think I've heard anything outrageous, and it's up to the chair to determine if it's out of line or not. And so at this point, I haven't heard anything up to this point, and I encourage members, but again, it's up to the chair, but we're all adults here. We can handle their freedom of expression to come here, and yeah, at this point I haven't heard anything egregious. So
thank you, Councillor Johnston. I'll just note that we don't really have a point of rebuttal or the opportunity. If you feel a rule has been broken, please use point of order. If you feel the rights of the body or you individually have been violated, please use point of privilege. I'll go over to Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
Hey, neighbor.
Hello, neighbor.
How's it going? Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to note the fact that you ran out of time just as you were getting to your recommendations which I'm assuming is kind of the most important part. So I'd like to, I'm wondering if you would be willing to share with us your recommendations, please.
Absolutely happy to do that. You know, and this is comes from a conversation I had with Mr. Shane Wenzel, a good friend of mine, and a former mayor, gentleman before the last lady, so we'll be fair here, has essentially, from what I understand, created a policy that adds $90,000 per door for construction. Now, how does that make houses affordable? So there's a way we can do that, and I have a note from Mr. Wenz on what we can do and do better to remove that cost. But when it comes to solutions, you know, there's a few things. Densification has become a failed one-size-fits-all ideological solution, but there's lots of different options. We got lots of land in Calgary, so let's use it effectively, and let's be calculated in where we densify, because it doesn't just fit anywhere. So what about the city taking some land, and I know they're going to do this when they took over Midfield years ago, which still sits there empty, and perhaps have some land you can lease to people so they can bring in modular homes and they can have a place for their family with a yard, and it's affordable because you take that land acquisition cost out of it. And there's also the opportunity to do some well thought out and well-planned container home villages. They're ideal for singles and couples and people that are currently homeless, and everybody always has this NIMBY. We don't want affordable housing in my neighborhood. Well, where do we put it? So greenfield development makes sense, where we can build the appropriate infrastructure around there, have transit, and get these people to work and do this thing efficiently. Because I think in Northeast, I can't remember where it is, I think the Lions have some little houses there, and I can't remember what neighborhood that is, and I think Harrison might be in your area. Like, why are we not doing more of that? You know, people may not want it in their backyard, but it's a great opportunity. We've seen on YouTube and TikTok and all these things, these container homes, and we can move these things in quickly and people can build them out quite affordable, and they can be actually quite temporary as well. So there's an option there. And the other thing is, why does Calgary have to grow? We're a unique city. I believe we're probably one of the largest in areas in North America as one physical entity or corporation. And so the cost of keep going out is astronomical, yes, but it's also not reasonable to densify just anywhere and everywhere. So what about building a sister city? You know, we could take Chestermere Lake and we could extend it and make a giant lake going further north. Having a lake there would actually create a microclimate that would actually do something to fix the hail problems in Northeast, potentially. But building a sister city could be another great option. And there's lots of opportunity there. There's lots of land. And, you know, pre-planning towns and satellite communities is not that hard. And we can always bring in transportation from there, buses and that sort of thing. There's lots and lots of opportunities, but we got to start thinking outside of the box instead of just jamming things in there, because we're not New York and we're not Toronto, we're not Vancouver. And we don't want to be. That's why we're in Calgary. That's why we are one of the best cities in the world to live, because we have family spaces. We have backyards and front yards where people can actually spend time congregating and getting to know their neighbors. When you meet on the sidewalk, it just doesn't work. And building community is something that's very important to the fabric in Calgary, because I remember the days you could leave your doors open and everybody knew everybody in the block. And we got to bring that back. And the outright blanket up zoning is hindering that process by jamming in density at all costs. And let's do better. Let's make Calgary stronger. Let's think outside of the box. Let's look at some of these smaller homes. Let's look at some of these trailer parks. You know, tell me, what's going on with Midfield? It's still sitting there empty today. We had to move these people out in a hurry and uproot these people, and they were homeless. And it's been sitting there for, 10 years now? It's insane. So I just urge council to think outside of the box, and it's a relief to see we have a council that's willing to listen and work towards solutions. But remember, this didn't come as a result of democracy. It was jammed down our throat as Calgarians because it was overwhelmingly obvious people didn't want it. We can tear it down, start again. Doesn't mean we're stuck with R1, R2 forever going forward. But let's be mindful. Let's be neighborly. Let's do what works for every specific community. You got all the people in the world willing to participate. This is great. This is what I love about Calgarians. They're the first ones to volunteer and get involved and to make a difference. Let's involve them and let's rebuild this. And let's make it bigger, better and greater without sounding like Donald Trump here, but like I know we can do much greater and we can make Calgary much better. But at what expense? Let's not do it at the expense of community, and let's not do it at the expense of family. Let's just do it right.
Thank you very much for the ideas, Mr. Williams. Really appreciate it. Happy to connect with you offline. Happy to give you an update in terms of Midfield Park and exactly where it's at and what I've learned since taking this over. You mentioned that you had a letter there from Mr. Wenzel. Happy for you to send it over to my office, but did you want it entered into the corporate record?
You know what I'll do is I'll commit to just putting it onto paper, and I'll send it to every councillor's office and to the mayor's office, just so they have it, because obviously if there's something the city can do better, obviously there's a fiduciary responsibility because we want to lower our costs of housing in this city, and that's one thing we can probably do is create more efficiencies.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. That's it for me, Your Worship.
All right, Councillor, no. Madam Clerk, would you be willing to recap what we've done with ourselves over the last 6 days?
I'd love to, Mayor Farkas. So all the way up until 9:30 tonight, Council has heard from 64 members of the public. Sorry, today Council has heard 64 members of the public, and altogether over the last couple of days, 351.
Do you have a sense of how many outstanding registered speakers that we haven't heard from? Approximately 200?
Close to 200, Mayor Farkas, but registrations have also been trickling in this evening, so those aren't completely unaccounted for yet.
And our schedule is tomorrow with a pretty loaded regular meeting.
Tomorrow's agenda for the regular meeting of council is quite extensive. There's 27 items on the consent agenda, I believe, a number of notices of motions, as well as a number of committee reports.
And Wednesday, I believe, pretty similarly with the Community Development Committee.
That's correct. Wednesday is the Community Development Committee, and there's some large items on that agenda as well.
Based on that, Councillor Kelly, are you willing to move the appropriate motion for us to resume our public hearing on Thursday at 9:30 a.m.? And that'll be a recess of this meeting? All right, that is up on the screen, seconded by Councillor Pantezopolis. All in favor? Any opposed? No one is opposed. Councillor Chabot is opposed. All right, Councillor Chabot is opposed, and that motion is carried. I will see you on Thursday for this meeting, and I will see you tomorrow for the other meeting.